Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Good. Be seated, please. Okay. Some of these lights are not supposed to be on. All of the lights should be off. All of them. Yeah, thank you. Good. All right. There we are. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. That's it. Oops. Sorry, I'm pushing all wrong buttons here. Welcome to you all. Welcome back to our Bhagavad Gita class. Welcome also to our many students watching online. We begin chapter 13 today. Always wonderful to begin a new chapter. The title of the chapter, Kshetrajna Yoga. I'll explain the meaning of the title in just a minute. But we'll begin with some recitation. And as always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Arjuna vacha, prakritam purushan chaiva, kshetram kshetrajnam evacha, etad veditum echami, Jnanam Jneyam Cha Keshava, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Idam Shariram Kaunteya, Kshetramitya vidhiyate, etad yo vetitam prahuhu, kshetrajna hyati tadvidaha, kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi, Sarvakshetreshu Bharata, kshetrajnayor jnanam, yattad jnanam matam mama, tat kshetram yaccha yadriksha, yadvikariyatascha yata, sachayo yat prabhavascha, tatsamasena me shunu, rishibhir bahudha gitam, chandobhir vividaih prataka, brahmasutra padaishchaiva, hetumadbhir vinishchitaihi. Good. We will pause there and come to the Opening of the 13th chapter. 13th chapter is now beginning the final group of 6 chapters. We've discussed before, first 6 chapters have as a primary topic Karma Yoga, not only topic, primary topic of the first 6 chapters, Karma Yoga. Primary topic of the middle 6 chapters that we just concluded, Bhakti, not surprising. And the primary topic of the final 6 chapters, which we begin today, Jnanam, knowledge. And varieties of knowledge. We're going to find amongst these 6 chapters, we're going to find elaborate descriptions of the 3 gunas. We're going to find descriptions of when these gunas are manifest in personalities. We'll see different personality types, different manifestations of the gunas. And of course, we're going to see Vedantic Jnanam, Atma Jnanam, self-knowledge, and knowledge of Ishvara, knowledge of Brahman. All of these topics come in the final set of 6 chapters. The title of the chapter, Kshetra, means field, Kshetrajna, knower of the field, yoga, and that expression comes from the very first verse. So we'll just see the first verse, and then the meaning of that will become clear. So let us begin. Arjuna vacha, prakritam purusham chaiva, prakritam purusham chaiva, kshetram kshetrajnameva cha, kshetram kshetrajnameva cha, etad veditam ecchami, etad veditam ecchami, Jnanam jneyam cha keshava, jnanam jneyam cha keshava. So Arjuna gives in this verse 3 pairs of questions. We'll discuss those 3 pairs of questions in just a moment. But before we do, something you may not know is that this particular verse is not technically part of the Bhagavad Gita. It's not present in the Mahabharata. It wasn't spoken by Arjuna. This verse is added conventionally by scholars, and it's added because the whole chapter is a response to 3 groups of 2 questions. So the questions Arjuna asks in this verse are answered in the chapter. Since the chapter is the answer, scholars created this verse to introduce the questions. This verse is not part of the original Bhagavad Gita. It's not in the it's not in the Mahabharata, as I said, but it is in most versions of the Bhagavad Gita, except for scholarly editions. For example, Madhusudana Saraswati's commentary that I follow to prepare for classes, he doesn't mention anything about this verse because it's not part of the Bhagavad Gita. But the fact that it's added by almost all scholars shows us its importance for us to understand the chapter. Without this verse, the chapter becomes much more difficult to understand. So even though it's not part of the Bhagavad Gita, it's accepted. And scholars always, not always, but mostly will include it. So the Arjuna is, we can say Arjuna is made to say in this verse. What is he made to say? He says he has these 3 pairs of questions. He says, and look at the third line, etat, this, veditum, to know, ichchami, I want. I want to know this, Arjuna's question. This I want to know. And what he wants to know are these 3 pairs of questions. The first pair, I want to know what is prakritam and what is purusham. Prakriti literally means nature. Purusha means being. But here, these words are actually technical words. Prakriti referring to cosmic nature, and Purusha referring to consciousness. These are actually technical terms used widely by a school of thought known as Sankhya. And we're going to be seeing several references to this in this chapter, to the school of thought known as Sankhya. For the teaching, and Sankhya, think of it as a parallel system to Vedanta. So it's a parallel system that has some similarities and some differences, some significant differences. But it turns out that Vedanta draws upon the teachings of Sankhya in explaining the world. So we'll see that in a few minutes, how Vedanta makes use of some teachings of Sankhya. So for the followers of Sankhya, this is the basic division of reality. There are things which are conscious. Consciousness is called Purusham, consciousness. And Prakritam is that which is not conscious, that which is Jada. So this basic division between that which is sentient or conscious and that which is insentient or non-conscious. By the way, one significant difference for Sankhya as opposed to Vedanta, Purusha, consciousness in Sankhya philosophy, is infinite in number, as opposed to Advaita Vedanta, which says consciousness is one. And Sri Krishna is going to make that very clear in 2 more verses. So please understand, we are going to see some teachings of Sankhya that we find useful, but we will reject certain teachings, like the multiplicity of consciousness, we reject. So the first of Arjuna's questions, what is Prakritam, cosmic nature, and Purusham, consciousness? Second group of questions, what is Kshetram, field, and in this context, field of experience. We're not talking about a farmer's field, we're talking about the field of experience, and Kshetrajna, the knower of the field of experience. Knower and known, subject and object. This is the most fundamental division in Vedanta. We could say in Sankhya, the fundamental division is Prakritam and Purusha. In Vedanta, the fundamental division is knower and known. Consciousness and what is known to consciousness. Here are the terms used, Kshetra, Kshetrajnam. The title of this chapter comes from that statement. Also, it's the first pair of questions that Sri Krishna addresses. He doesn't start with Prakritam and Purusha. He begins with Kshetra, Kshetrajna in the next verse. We'll see that in just a moment. Etad veditum echami, these I want to know. Arjuna asks Sri Krishna, and the third pair of questions is what is jnanam and jnayam? Keshava, O Krishna, what is jnanam, knowledge, and jnayam, that which is to be known? And jnanam here is going to end up having the meaning of what is required to gain knowledge. We'll see that in a couple of classes. So jnanam and jnayam Keshava, Arjuna's 3 pairs of questions are given in this first verse, which was technically added by scholars. With that, we continue. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Idam Shariram Kaunteya, Idam Shariram Kaunteya, Kshetramitya Vidhiyate, Kshetramitya Vidhiyate, Etadyo Vetitam Prahuhu, Etadyo Vetitam Prahuhu, Kshetrajñahati tadviraha, Kshetrajñahati tadvidaha. You can make out here that Sri Krishna is addressing Arjuna's question about what is kshetra, field of experience, and what is kshetrajna, the knower of the field of experience. Very simply, what is subject, what is object, what is the knower, what is the known? And Sri Krishna begins, Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, idam shariram, this body, and you can almost imagine Sri Krishna tapping his arm, this body, or maybe pointing to Arjuna, this body, kshetram, iti abhidiyate, iti, thus, abhidiyate, it is called what? Kshetram, field of experience, object. And this is where Vedanta begins. This is really Vedanta 101, and that is, your body is not you. Any more than an object like a chair is you. Any object must necessarily be different from you because fundamentally you are a conscious being. Those very simple words, but very helpful. By the way, conscious being are the words chit and sat. Satchidananda. So when we say you are a conscious being, that's a translation of sat and chit. As a conscious being, you are the knower of the body, and anything known is different from you, the knower. This is the most fundamental division that we need to make to understand these teachings and to break out of, and we're going to talk about a moment how these teachings lead to the cessation of suffering. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But for now, Sri Krishna is addressing Arjuna's question, and that is this fundamental division between knower and known. Kshetrajna, the knower of the field of experience, everything you experience, and the kshetram, that which is known, and the most obvious example is your physical body. So Sri Krishna gives a very brief answer first, and then he elaborates. So first of all, what is the kshetram, field of experience? A good example of kshetram is your body. Not just your body, but especially your physical body. Then he continues, yaha, one who, veti, knows, tam, this, etat, tam, one who knows this body, kshetrajna. One who knows, I'm just figuring out the grammar here. Yahaveti, one who knows, etat, this body. Tam prahuhu, that person calls this body, kshetrajna, one who, I'm really messing this up badly. It's interesting that I can manage to do that quite nicely. I just did. So, what Sri Krishna is saying here, and the Sanskrit is very simple. I can even mess up simple Sanskrit. That's good. The real skill. All right. So, yo veti etat, the one who knows the body. Tam, that knower. Prahuhu, they call the knower of the body. What do they call the knower of the body? Kshetrajna, the knower of the field of experience. Iti, thus say, tadviduhu, those who know correctly, unlike what I just messed up here. So, what is Sri Krishna saying here? In the first half, he defines kshetra, field of experience, as exemplified by your physical body. In the second half, and the one who knows the physical body, that one is kshetrajna, literally the knower of the field of experience, simply put, conscious being. So we begin here. You are a conscious being who is aware of objects. Objects including your physical body. And anything known to you is separate from you. This is the most fundamental division. There is you. I'm smiling. I still remember this humorous event. When I first met Puja Swami Tadatmananda, it was in 1981, long ago. And he had been teaching in this country only for a few years. And his Tamilian accent was quite strong in those days. It got better as time went along, but in those days it was quite strong. And as a young American, I wasn't very used to these accents. So when he went on talking about you and everything else, and I was really confused. What in the world is he talking about? You and everything else. You all get it. I didn't get it initially. But this is a division that Sri Krishna is talking about, the difference between you, the conscious being, and everything else, the field of experience. This is so important and fundamental. In Shankaracharya's commentary, not Madhusudana's, Shankaracharya goes on for page after page after page, because this fundamental distinction between knower and known is really the platform, the basis on which the teachings of Vedanta are built. And we'll see more of that as we continue. So let us proceed. Kshetrajñam chapi mam vidhi, kshetrajñam chapi mam vidhi, sarvakshetreshu bharata, sarvakshetreshu bharata, kshetrajñayor jnanam, kshetrajñayor jnanam, yattad jnanam matam mama, yattad jnanam matam mama. Now, Sri Krishna chooses to elaborate more on kshetrajñam. Prior verse, he says, kshetra is your body. Kshetrajña is the knower of the body. And now in American English, this next line would be called a bombshell, because of the weight of what Sri Krishna says. He says, oh, by the way, Arjuna, vidhi, you should understand that mam, I am the kshetrajñam, I am the conscious being, the knower, sarva kshetreshu, with regard to everything known. Sarva, all, kshetra, all fields of experience. With regard to anything and everything known, Bharata, O Arjuna, please understand, vidhi, please understand that mam, I am the kshetrajña, I am the knower. What is Sri Krishna saying here? This is Vedanta. We've discussed many times, especially way back in chapter 2, that unlike what Sankhya teaches, Sankhya teaching the multiplicity of consciousnesses, Advaita Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita teach that consciousness is one. The same consciousness that reveals the activities happening in my mind is the same consciousness revealing the activities of your mind and every mind. As we've discussed before, if you wonder, why don't you know my thoughts? It's because that question belongs to your mind. Consciousness doesn't have that question. Your mind has that question. And your mind is definitely separate from my mind. But your consciousness and my consciousness are not separate, which means the term your consciousness and my consciousness is a misnomer, because there is but one consciousness manifest in all sentient beings. That consciousness is what we loosely call the inner divinity, what we technically call Satchidananda Atma. And Sri Krishna boldly says here, by the way, Arjuna, I am that consciousness residing in the illumining the minds of every conscious being. Now, this really helps understand something clearly about in Advaita Vedanta. Sometimes Advaita Vedanta gets misunderstood. I don't want to point fingers, but it happens that the followers of ISKCON, the modern Hare Krishna movement, look at the teachings of Advaita Vedanta and Shankara, and they make this misunderstanding. They think that Vedanta teaches that you are God. They point at the Mahavakya, Tat Tvam Asi, saying that you are God. And that really is a misunderstanding. They haven't really had the opportunity to understand these teachings properly. If they understood, and if they understood this verse in particular, it would make it very clear that what Sri Krishna is saying is that the consciousness by which you know your thoughts, the consciousness by which I know my thoughts, and the consciousness by which Ishvara knows everything is one and the same consciousness. Consciousness is one. We're not equating you, an individual being, and Ishvara, the God of the cosmos. Advaita Vedanta does not attempt to, you are very, very limited, finite, small. Ishvara is everything. The individual jiva and Ishvara are not equated by Advaita Vedanta, but the essential nature of the jiva and the essential nature of Ishvara are one and the same. That's what Tat Tvamasi reveals that truth. Tat, the essential nature of Ishvara, and Tvam, the essential nature of you. The essential nature of you is Satchidananda Atma. The essential nature of Ishvara, the technical terms are Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. I'm not going to get into a big class about that right now. It's not the right place. But it is the essential natures that are equated, not Ishvara as a cosmic being and you as an individual being are not equated. So here, the best way to understand this verse is to say, when Sri Krishna says, understand that I am that consciousness, meaning Ishvara's consciousness, your consciousness, my consciousness are not different consciousnesses. One limitless, all-pervasive consciousness manifest in you and me as individual beings, manifest in Ishvara as the cosmic being. The same consciousness that's manifest in individual beings is the same consciousness manifest in the cosmic being, Ishvara. That's what he says here. And he concludes by saying, Kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam. Jnanam, this knowledge of what? Kshetra kshetrajnayoho, dual. This knowledge of kshetra, field of experience, and kshetrajna, knower of the field of experience. This knowledge, yat, that which is knowledge, tat jnanam. This is it's kind of a figurative expression. That knowledge is the real knowledge. Matam mama, in my opinion, this knowledge is the real meaning important knowledge. This understanding is important. I'm paraphrasing. To know the distinction between subject and object, field of experience and knower of field of experience, knower and known, body and conscious being, to know the distinction is crucial, is essential. And here's where we see once again that these teachings are not some mere philosophy. These teachings are meant to solve the problem of human suffering. How do they solve the problem of human suffering? We all start off in life identified with the human body. This is me. And as long as this human body is me, I own all the problems of the body. And as we've all figured out by now, the older we get, the more problems our bodies have, which means as you age, you gain more and more problems. What a way to live a life. So your problems keep increasing, and then you die. What kind of philosophy of life is that? Terrible. What Vedanta addresses is the confusion in thinking the body is yours. If you get it with the help of his teachings, it's not that hard, that you are the knower of the body. Anything known to you is different from the body, and here's where the benefit of that understanding comes in. If you understand that the body is not you, then the problems of the body belong to the body and not you. And further, the problems of the body don't even affect you. This has to be discovered. The problems of the body are a fact, an increasing fact day by day. I'm smiling because I deal with that too, day by day. But with the help of these teachings, you can discover how you as a conscious being are utterly unaffected by the problems of your body. Your consciousness makes known your body and its problems, but your consciousness remains utterly unaffected. Way back in chapters 2 and in chapter 2 in particular, we spent quite a bit of time understanding how your consciousness is like a light that illumines the mental objects in your mind. And just like a light isn't affected by what it shines upon, this light shines on me, this is all orange. The light doesn't become orange because it shines on an orange person. The light remains utterly unaffected by what it shines upon. Well, you've heard me say before, if the sun shines on a sacred temple or a filthy sewer, the sun is not tainted by the sewer or become more holy by shining on the sacred temple. Light is utterly unaffected by what it shines upon. Your consciousness remains utterly unaffected even in the presence of an aging body and its increasing problems. We're not going to talk further about it now because it's not our topic here. We've discussed this at great length elsewhere. So Sri Krishna says, this, I'll paraphrase, this is the knowledge that counts. What kind of knowledge? Knowledge which is discernment of the difference between knower and known, in particular between you, the conscious being, and your body and mind, which are known to you. This discernment, in Sanskrit, we call it viveka jnanam, knowledge which is in the form of viveka, discernment. All right, then. So Sri Krishna explained kshetrajna in verse 3. Now in verse 4, he elaborates on kshetra. And he's going to elaborate for several verses now on kshetra. Tat kshetram yatcha yadrikcha, tat kshetram yatcha yadrikcha, yadvikari yatascha yata, yadvikari yatascha yata, sachayo yat prabhavascha, sachayo yat prabhavascha, tat samasena me shrunu, tat samasena me shrunu. So, tat kshetram. Arjuna had a twofold question. What is kshetra and kshetrajna? Prior verse, Sri Krishna elaborated on kshetrajna In this verse, he begins to elaborate on not just kshetra, yet chayadrik, and what is the nature of that kshetra. Not only that, but yat vikari, what are the modifications of that kshetra? Yataha chayat, and from what did that kshetra come from? What is its source? What is its origin? Ishvara. And one more thing, he says, yat chayo, yat prabhavaha cha, and what are the effects of that kshetra? So here, Sri Krishna says he's going to elaborate on 5 things, not just what is a kshetra, but also yadrik, what is the nature of the kshetra, yat vikari, what are the modifications of the kshetra, yatahacha, what is the source or origin of the kshetra, and yat prabhavahacha, what are the effects, what are the consequences of that kshetra. It sounds like we're in for a long session. No. He says, tat samasena me shunu. Tat, that, me shunu, hear it from me, samasena, briefly. Hear it from me briefly. How briefly? In 1.5 verses. So we're not going into a long discourse here. Just in 1.5 verses, he's going to explain all of that in brief. Before he explains that, he undertakes what is called stuti. He praises this knowledge. Arjuna, because Arjuna, I don't know if Arjuna would have this problem. When a teacher teaches, and you all pay. I need to give a better example. When I was living at my guru's ashram in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, I was invited to give some lectures at the University of Pennsylvania in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, nearby. So I go there, and I'm addressing an undergraduate class in philosophy and telling them something about I forget the topic, Advaita Vedanta or Bhagavad Gita, something. I don't remember. So I actually gave several classes there, and I remember addressing the students, and they're all 20, not even 20-somethings, some of them late teens. Undergraduates, 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age. And I noticed that they were like, if they were looking at things or doing things, looking around, they were bored. So I don't have that problem here, but I had that problem there where I had to catch their attention. I had to hold their attention. And what Sri Krishna does here is a technique sometimes used to catch the attention of an audience, and that is you praise the subject matter before you teach it. It's like if you're having a conversation, or if you were to teach, and you say, what I'm about to tell you is really important, so listen up. That is basically what Sri Krishna does in this next verse. Not that Arjuna needs it, because Arjuna is paying attention, but this is the style in the literature, a verse of praise to catch your attention. Rishibhir bahudha gitam, Rishibhir bahudha gitam, Chandobhir vividai prataka, Chandobhir vividai prataka, Brahma sutra padais chaiva, Brahma sutra padais chaiva, Hetu madbhir vinishchitaihi, Hetu madbhir vinishchitaihi. So explaining this subject matter, Sri Krishna says, this subject matter is Gitam. Gita means literally sung, but here it means it has been taught, or better yet, why use the word Gita rather than taught? He says it has a meaning that it's been extolled. You wouldn't just translate it as it was sung. You might translate it as this teaching about kshetra. That's what he's introducing now. This teaching about kshetra is not sung, it was extolled, would be a good translation. In my translation here, taught is okay, but extolled would be more appropriate. This teaching was Gitam, it was extolled. How? Bahudha, in many ways. By whom? Rishibhihi, by the ancient rishis. The kshetra was extolled in so many ways. Not only that, but it was extolled by what? Chandobhihi. Chandas is a verse, hymn. Chandobhihi, by verses referring to the Vedas. This is a common way of referring to the Vedas. Vividhaihi chandobhihi, by many verses in the Vedas. This topic has been Gitam, has been extolled, pratak, separately, individually. And also this topic about kshetram has been Gitam, extolled by whom? Brahma Sutra Padaihi Cha Eva. It has also been extolled by the Brahma Sutras, Brahma Sutra being a very technical text on Advaita Vedanta, a very important text on Vedanta. It's been extolled by the Brahma Sutras. Also, it's been extolled by whom? Last line, Hetumatbihi. A funny way of expressing one who is a master of logic. Hetu means reason. Hetumat, one who possesses reason, reasoning. Hetumatbihi, by logicians, by those who wield logic, who are vinishchitaihi, who are very clear thinking wielders of logic. You might translate it as philosopher. By those who wield logic very, very proficiently, it has been extolled by them. Now, the fact that Sri Krishna is listing different groups of people who have extolled the kshetra, the field of experience, the world that we experience, this suggests that the world is understood in different ways by different people. So, for example, the world was described in a certain way by the followers of Sankhya. And then the world was described in different ways by followers of other Indian schools of thought, like Nyaya and Vaisheshika. We won't get into all this technical detail, but there are different schools of thought that describe the world differently. It's like in science. Before Einstein came along, the teachings of Newton were dominant. They call it Newtonian worldview. And then Einstein came along and kind of toppled the cart, so to speak, and now Newtonian physics was out. Now Einstein's physics was in, only for a few years until Einstein's physics was overcome by the later quantum physics, which is kind of like the current state of physics. And you can be sure eventually quantum physics will be superseded by something else over a period of time. In any particular period of time, there is a prevailing worldview about nature. And the reason I'm making a point here is at the time of the Bhagavad Gita's composition, the prevailing worldview about nature was a worldview adopted by Sankhya. And if you don't understand this point, you won't understand the next verse at all. Because the next verse introduces the Sankhya worldview about nature. And Vedanta adopts partially. Vedanta adopts the Sankhya worldview in explaining nature. Why? Because it was the prevailing worldview at this time. So let us proceed, and we're now going to see a pre-scientific explanation of how the world came to exist. They like the big word cosmology. Cosmology means the study of how the world came into existence, and we'll see that. And this is Sri Krishna's 1.5 verses now, explaining what is kshetra. So he begins in this verse, Mahabhutanyahankaro, Mahabhutanyahankaro, Buddhiravyaktameva cha, Buddhiravyaktameva cha, Indriyani dashaikam cha, Indriyani dashaikam cha, Panchachendriya gocharaha, Panchachendriya gocharaha. And if you don't understand the philosophy of Sankhya, you won't make heads nor tails of this verse. This verse looks like a bunch of stuff. So just to see the words, what is a bunch of, so kshetra, field of experience, means what? Sri Krishna gives like a shopping list. This world of stuff includes Mahabhutani, fundamental elements, of which there are 5. Ahankara, ego, but ahankara is going to have a different meaning, so hold on to that just for a moment. Buddhi, intellect. Okay, but you'll find buddhi has a different meaning in just a moment. Avyaktam, unmanifest. I thought we're talking about the world we experience, avyaktam. Then indriyani, your senses. Dashaikam, 11 of them. You have 11 senses? What are those senses? And finally, panchacha, indriya gocharaha. Indriya gochara, available, accessible to the indriyas, which means sense objects, objects that are known to your senses, which are 5. That's a little easier to understand. But when you just see the words of this verse, what in the world is he talking about? What this verse does is give in almost a coded way the cosmology of Sankhya, which was the prevailing worldview at the time of the Bhagavad Gita. So let me go to the board and show you what this verse is explaining. So this is cosmology according to Sankhya, which Advaita Vedanta borrows. So one word is a good place to begin. Avyakta, unmanifest. So both Advaita Vedanta and Sankhya agree that before the universe was vyakta, manifest, it was avyakta, unmanifest first. Something doesn't come from nothing. Something comes from something. Avyakta is like the seed, bija, out of which the world emerged. So avyakta here is a term used by both Advaita Vedanta and Sankhya, but it represents in Sankhya Prakriti. So the beginning point in Sankhya is Prakriti, and that Prakriti, Sankhya also will call it avyakta, unmanifest. And from this avyakta came, and this is funny, not funny use of words, a coded use of words. Because in the evolution of the universe, cosmology, how did the universe come into existence? The next step in this verse is called buddhi, but in Sankhya, they call it mahat. Mahat is a principle of intelligence. So when you start with Prakriti, nature, you think of like random particles, but that random particles was invested with intelligence. So in Sankhya's worldview, of that Prakriti became Mahat, which is nature endowed with intelligence, which in this verse is indicated by the code word buddhi, intelligence. Next in the verse comes ahankara. Very familiar to us in Vedanta, except it doesn't mean ego here at all. Because in Sankhya, they use the same word, ahankara, in a completely different way. So in Sankhya, the word ahankara has nothing to do with ego. People come later. There are no people around yet. So ahankara can't have anything to do with ego. You can think of ahankara in Sankhya. Ahankara is, we'll call it the principle of individuation. So we're seeing steps in the evolution of the universe. Like if you look up on Google, look up in Wikipedia, look up Big Bang, and you'll find that the Big Bang underwent several stages of evolution. So just as the Big Bang evolved into the matter and energy that we know today, in the same way Prakriti evolved, this is the Sankhya worldview, Prakriti evolved into Mahat, becoming endowed with intelligence. Mahat evolved into Ahankara, gaining this principle of individuation, and then things become threefold. What are the three? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. This is part of the Sankhya worldview, that the world is composed of these three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And from this evolution of ahankara into the three gunas, and from the sattva guna, what evolves are your 5 senses, which are called jnanendriya. Jnana indriya are sense organs. Sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And then 5 karmendriyas. Organs of action, karma. Karma, indriya, becomes karmendriya. Organs of actions, grasping, walking, talking, procreation, and excretion are the 5 organs of action. But he says, dasha ekam. Dasha 10, ekam, plus 1. What is the 11th sense to evolve from sattva? And it is mind. Called antakarana, inner sense. So these are 5 karanas, sense organs, and then there is an antakarana, mind. So here we have, last line, third line. Indriyani dashaikam. Here we have the 11 indriyas, which are all evolved from sattva. And then evolving from tamas are 5 tamas. So sattva is responsible for sentiency and intelligence, not consciousness. If your brain was made of rubber, this is silly. If your brain was made of rubber, could you think? No. So our brains are something absolutely unique and amazing. And that uniqueness and amazing quality of our brains and minds is due to sattva guna. Over here, tamas is responsible for materiality, the stuff of the universe. Not the intelligence of the universe, but the raw matter of the universe. So according to this, we have 5. How does it come here? It comes Mahabhutani. Okay, pancha, yeah. Okay, you have little confusion in language. So the Sankhya, give first the Sankhya terminology, then I'll relate it to the verse. So in Sankhya, you have 5 tanmatras, which you can understand as subtle elements: space, air, fire, water, earth, but not as physical things, as non-physical things, which is to say they are sukshma, subtle. But then these 5 tanmatras undergo a process of recombination and they become 5 bhutas, the 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, things that are tangible, sthula, physical, gross, tangible. In terms of the verse, Mahabhutani is referring to the 5 tanmatras, the 5, call them precursor elements. And then at the bottom, Panchacha Indriya Gocharaha, the 5 objects of our senses, that's referring to the 5 physical elements. Tanmatras are precursor elements, and these bhutas are the perceived elements. Can you imagine? Comes from that verse. People who are familiar with Sankhya philosophy will recognize this chart because it's very central to the teachings of Sankhya. And just, by the way, so that you know what this word Sankhya means, Sankhya means to count. And Sankhya is famous for counting 24 principles. 24 principles. Do you think we got 24 up on the board? We better. Or I've made a mistake. Here we got 5, and 5 is 10. 15, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. These are the 24 fundamental principles for which Sankhya is famous. This is part of an ancient world view, and this is the world view that was prevalent at that time. So this is a world view that's quoted by Krishna in explaining what is kshetra to Arjuna. So each, in a coded way, this verse 6, gives you all of these aspects of what is kshetra. And Sri Krishna says he's going to tell us samasena briefly. That's pretty much it. There's only a half a verse more. We'll just go on and see the half a verse. By the way, details in this context are completely unimportant. Just to make it very clear, there is no tremendous value to be gained in learning or memorizing any of this on the board. But in order to understand the verse, we needed to understand the structure of Sankhya cosmology, this ancient worldview. So you understand well enough. You don't have to remember the details or make note of the details. This, we'll call it a philosophical explanation of kshetra. Now, in the next half a verse, we're going to get an experiential definition. This is philosophical. Now let's just finish with this experiential. Oh, where am I? Let me come back here. Okay. So now having finished this philosophical explanation, now we get a half a verse of experiential explanation, followed by a conclusion. Ichcha dvesha sukha dukkam. Ichcha dvesha sukham dukkam. Sanghatash chetana dhritihi. Sanghataschetana dhritihi etat kshetram samasena etat kshetram samasena savikaramudahratam savikaramudahratam. Good. So after completing that philosophical description of the Sankhya worldview of what is kshetra, field of experience, now Sri Krishna gives very, very simply and briefly from an experiential standpoint. What do you experience? Well, ichha, desire, dvesha, in this context, revulsion. Ichha is like raga and dvesha. Ichha, raga, to be drawn towards something. Dvesha, to be repulsed from something, driven away from something. Sukham and dukkham, you know the words well. Happiness or pleasure, and dukkha, pain or suffering, what we experience every day. Ichha, dvesha, raga, dvesha, sukham, dukkham, pleasure and pain. Sanghataha, body. Literally, sanghata means that which is put together. And the significance of that definition, why call the body sanghata? Usually we call it deha. Deha in Sanskrit suggests dahana yogya, that which is good for being burnt. Because where will your body end up? It'll end up being burnt. So that's what the word deha suggests. Here the word used for body is sanghata, an assemblage. And the significance of the word assemblage is anything put together falls apart. Basic principle. Your car is put together, it falls apart. Your house is put together, falls apart. Your body is an assemblage of parts, it falls apart. Also, chetana, now careful now, chetana cannot mean consciousness here. Why? We're talking about kshetram. We're not talking about kshetrajna. Kshetrajna is consciousness. So here chetana refers to mental faculties. We can call it alertness, not consciousness. In this context, alertness of the mind, and dhritihi, courage, a mental strength. So very briefly, Sri Krishna just gives a number of features of the kshetra, field of experience, that you experience every day. You experience what happens in your mind. You experience raga, dvesha, born of your own mind. You experience sukha, dukkha from external factors. You experience sanghata, your physical body. You experience chetana, your own alertness, and dhriti, mental fortitude. You experience all of that. So here we have prior one verse, the Sankhya worldview, and here half verse. These are of experiential explanation of what is kshetra, field of experience. Sri Krishna concludes, etat kshetram. And this is the kshetra. This is a field of experience. Udahratam, last word. Etat kshetram udahratam. This is the udahratam, this is the explanation of what is kshetra. And this savikaram, along with its modifications, in fact, that list on the board shows all the evolution of vyakta, evolving at various states. So in this verse, when Sri Krishna uses the word savikaram, and in the last line he's talking about that evolution of vyakrata, of vyakta, undergoing that manifestation. So this is the explanation, udahratam, of kshetram, the field of experience, savikaram, together with its evolution, and Sri Krishna says this is the explanation, samasena, in brief. this briefly as the explanation. Notice he goes very briefly through this. I went through this very briefly because it's not the main subject matter. We can't ignore it because we have to deal with it. We have to deal with the world around us. We can't simply close our eyes and be in meditation 24/7. We have to deal with the world around us. So we had better understand the world sufficiently. Not in all the detail that Sankhya gives us, but sufficiently. And sufficiently so that we can discern, and this is where our class ends. We have to understand the kshetra, the field of experience, starting with your physical body. You have to understand it sufficiently so that you can discern the difference between you and everything else, as my guru said. You have to discern the difference between you, the conscious being, and your body and mind. And that discernment has to be so clear that you know the problems of your body belong to your body and don't affect you, the conscious being. The problems of your mind belong to your mind and don't affect you, the conscious being. The problems of your spouse, your children, your parents, your boss, your mother-in-law, whatever are their problems, the problems belong to them and not to you. And those problems don't affect you, that conscious being, in any meaningful way, just like light is utterly unaffected by what it shines upon. In the same way, you, as a conscious being, are utterly unaffected by whatever you experience, body, mind, mother-in-law, etc. Okay, this is a good place to conclude our class. In the next class, we go on to the next pair of Arjuna's questions, Jnanam and Jnayam. I'll introduce that at the next class. Two important announcements before we conclude today. First of all, we discussed in the meditation session that we're going to change our mask policy starting next week. Up till now, we've been requiring masks, so starting next week, masks will be optional. All of our other restrictions are not optional. You have to be vaccinated, boosted, you have to be, you should not have any contact with anyone who's got the virus, and you should not be having a virus, having a fever or any symptoms. And these rules are important because there are some people here who are concerned for their health, and those of you who have some concerns, you can please continue to wear a mask and know that everyone around you, even if they're unmasked, they will be vaccinated and healthy. Also, our circulation system, air circulation will continue, so this will be a healthy environment, even though masks will be optional starting next week. Also, I'll mention tomorrow we have satsang, question-answer period, 6 p.m. From the looks of the weather, it will probably be indoors rather than outdoors. We'll see. Anyway, come join us for satsang tomorrow at 6, and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashranvan Utabasira Sadhanam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gurudhatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.